So let's talk about what is the nightmare of the selling of the American dream. Electricity was easy to sell, and the American dream hinged upon it. It was probably one of the easiest sales jobs ever. With electricity in your house and barn, you won't have to produce, make, store, or buy candles, fat, or kerosene. Imagine just walking up and pulling on a chain and having your room flooded with lights. Imagine getting up at night to go to the restroom and not having to light a candle or a lantern. Imagine all the things you can now do at night in the dark. Your day can start earlier and end later. Think of all the time you will save. And if you already have power coming to your house to provide electric light, why not think of what a refrigerator will do for you, a freezer, a washer and dryer, an iron, or an electric stove? I mean, you already have electricity. Why would you deny yourself the good things in life? All of these can be added for a nominal fee, and each on its own is relatively cheap to operate. And if you can't afford it all right now, you can just buy it on credit. You can pay it off by the month in easy payments. Of course, you'll have to work harder and longer hours, but that should be easy with all the electric light right at your fingertips. If it gets to the point where your farm will not support all of the new payments you've accrued, you can always get a job in town. But you'll need to buy a car and car insurance, and your taxes will go up so you can have a nice road to drive on. But that's okay because your wife can just get a job too. Electrification was supposed to make everyone equal, but it caused the largest transfer of real wealth in all of history. Electrification was supposed to save everyone time and money, but it caused people to work harder and longer hours, and eventually necessitated that both parents go to work in order to finance the costs of all those newly manufactured so-called needs. Electrification was supposed to broaden horizons, educate, and free the masses from ignorance and superstition, but instead it shrunk the world and through specialization created generations of ignorant, unviable, colonized, debt-burdened slaves. Electrification destroyed the concept of local community and replaced it with the faceless global metropolis operating by a soulless global morality. Okay, do you hear what I'm trying to say? The most important victim of electrification and the Industrial Revolution was the biblical concept of family. In 1752, most Americans would live their entire lives and rarely travel more than a county away from their homes. Most children, when they were in need of care, instruction, or wisdom, had both parents around them at all times. If they needed older wisdom or some historical perspective, they could usually walk less than a mile down the road and talk to other family members. If they needed a doctor, he would come to your house, and he'd probably take milk, eggs, or butter as payment. By 1852, the destruction of this distinct way of life was well on its way, but was only then on the horizon. The war against agrarianism and the old ways was still on the drawing board in 1852, but it was as inevitable as the sunrise. The winds of war were already blowing through the boardrooms of Yankee corporations and the sanctuaries of the corporate churches. The industrial heads were already stirring the pot of greed and covetousness. The factories were already belching black smoke into the skies over hundreds of cities, and the power-hungry elite were growing ever richer as the trickle of the country people began into the cities. At the turn of the 20th century, mankind would leap forward technologically than he had in the previous 3,000 years put together. But by 1910, the world had seen the invention and widespread use of electricity, air conditioning, refrigeration of meats and foods, the telephone, the radio, automobile, and the airplane. By 1952, only 200 years after Ben Franklin flew his kite, the transformation was mostly complete. A couple of world wars had put an end to what was left of America's once dominant farming heritage, and most Americans had lost any cultural memory of the old agrarian world that had given birth to so much freedom and wealth. There is a second generation of baby boomers in my life that have once expressed a proud joy of these sad facts. In a short 200 years, America went from a land colonized with strong, intelligent, and virtuous farmers, a people who had conquered the land and the elements, and who had lived lives of relative peace and freedom, to a land of consumer slaves and thoughtless eaters. A nation of people who allowed the land and their most sacred cultural traditions to be raped and destroyed for the benefit of the very rich and powerful. Today, if you try to speak to people about living without electricity, the eyes of most of them glaze over, and you will see that they have no concept of their own history. They will say things like, how can anyone live without electricity or electric light, without air conditioning or without refrigeration, or who would want to? It's impossible. Only a fool would even entertain such a thought. By such ignorant statements, we have become a nation of slanderers, defaming our own ancestors, a nation of consumers who squander the intellectual, moral, and social resources of a people who were far greater than we are. We openly mock our Creator when we deny the fact that in His original creation, He made us all to be farmers and then gifted the female as a helper. Okay, that's it for now. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or not that the invention of electricity led to the selling and now unattainable American dream. And remember, a simple life is a beautiful life.